Great, thank you, Anna. Well, we do have a real gem here. First time we've done this, I think, at a mystery school for sure. And it really takes us deeper into the question of perception. I always say that you have, like in 12 steps, you have to admit you have a problem. Have to admit you have a problem before you can reach to a higher power for the correction of that problem. But if someone goes to Alcoholics Anonymous and stays in denial, even about the problem, then the solution's there, but it's not accessible. And so it is with perception, that really the Course is like cheering us on, and it's asking us to come first to an admission of a problem, but not a problem in the world. It's asking us to come to an admission that we have a perceptual problem. We're perceiving fragmented world, we're perceiving in a fragmented way, and that is the perceptual problem. It's not an economic problem, it's not a relationship problem, it's not a problem with the ozone layer, it's not anything that it seems to be. It's not really a specific problem, but it's just a way that I'm looking at the world problem. And then when you come into that, then you can open up to the correction. But the world was made to not admit that you have a perceptual problem. Seeing something that's not even there, that's a perceptual problem. Seeing fragmentation where there is unity and wholeness, that's a perceptual problem. So this episode we're going to see tonight is a Black Mirror episode, and it's called Bête Noire, which I think translates to Black Beast. And really we could say, in Course in Miracles terms, the Black Beast is the ego. It's the belief in separation from God. It's the error. And yet it's oftentimes talked about in the world like his ego, her ego, or this evil person, or evil force, or evil spirits, or something. But that's a projection. But the error itself is an error, it's held in mind. And as Jesus teaches us, it can only be corrected. In fact, it has already been corrected, but you can't accept the correction until you see that it's in the mind. So, some of you know a bit about quantum physics. Through the years, physicists have experimented. I think probably one of the most famous and perplexing experiments in physics was the double slit experiment, in which particles, subatomic particles, are fired through little slits and they come out as waves. And then they discovered that they were perplexed, and then they said, oh, it seems to be that the observer of the experiment has something to do with the particles turning into waves. David Bohm was a very famous physicist, and he spent a lot of time, some of you know, dialoguing with Krishnamurti, very open-minded physicist, but he spent decades and decades. I think he got deported from the United States. He was down in Brazil. He went to Israel where he met his wife. Then he was up in England. But he spent his whole life kind of trying to discover what was going on. How do the particles turn into waves? And what is this strange thing called the observer? And now at this stage, a lot of scientists are starting to get into consciousness, which was not the case, but they're starting to look and see it has to have something to do with consciousness. I think as the story goes too, David Bohm spent his whole life trying to understand what was going on, and then one day, I think he was in his office at work, and he had a eureka moment where he felt like, I got it, I understand. And he sent a message to his wife, and that was it. He never even made it home. He had such a eureka with finding the core of it that he never made it back to see his wife. He passed right there. And this movie, it's really an episode, helps us go very, very deep into the perceptual problem, because Jesus teaches us projection makes perception. He also teaches us that all perception is false. Even forgiveness and the forgiven world, the happy dream, is false, because God didn't create that. It was made by the Holy Spirit for us as a reflection of truth and a reflection of reality and oneness. But even so, projection makes perception, and then God doesn't project. God only extends love and light. So all projection is really seeing something that's not there, and it's done through the process of trying to give meaning and making up a private world with private thoughts. So in this world, Jesus is saying, you perceive through the ego lens, and you're perceiving a private world, and that world and those private thoughts cannot be shared. The very simple principle is that only thoughts of God, only thoughts that come from Spirit, can be shared. So you really can't share bank accounts, you can't share properties, you can't share bodies, you can't share anything in the perceptual world, because it's a projection of private minds and private thoughts. And by definition, Jesus' definition, it can't be shared. Only a single purpose, only the Holy Spirit's purpose is capable of being shared. That's why I had the prayer, I'm here only to be truly helpful. You're praying for the Holy Spirit's purpose. Only a single purpose can endow events with stable meaning. Only a single purpose can unify perception beyond what we would call situations. It seems to the human being like we go from one situation to another, to another, to another. But as we allow the Holy Spirit's purpose to become our single purpose, then everything in perception becomes unified. And that's what the happy dream is. So this episode tonight will help us start to see that in a very, very, very deep way. So I did look for some things from the Course that could help us. I know when I watched this episode, every single time I've watched it again, I see more. It's one of those things that you watch it the first time through, and you go, wow, at the end. And then you watch it again, and you just can't help but be noticing so many more things. And then the third time through, oh my gosh, I didn't see that. It's very well made, because it just, once your mind is ready to see what it's pointing at, and it does get more and more ready, so you just seem to see more and more and more. You recognize more and more through this. So in that sense, it's a really good teaching device, because you see more and more each time. And that's what we want. We want to see with the vision of Christ. We want to see with a holistic perspective. Lesson number 253 in the workbook. My capital self, my Christ self, is ruler of the universe. It is impossible that anything should come to me unbidden by myself. Even in this world, it is I who rule my destiny. What happens is what I desire. What does not occur is what I do not want to happen. This must I accept. Well, you can see from that line that it doesn't leave room for victimization. It doesn't leave room for mistreatment. It doesn't leave room for abuse. What happens is what I desire, what does not occur is what I do not want to happen. This must I accept. If I'm going to return my mind to spirit, to creation, to reality, then that's a real basic thing. That there's no chance, there's no accidents, there's nothing fortunate or unfortunate. There's no such thing as luck. Even the founder of Christian Science, Mary Baker Eddy, I thought that was well named, Christian Science. She put two words together that really weren't together, and she took hell for it too. she really got a lot of seeming projections back in the 1800s. You can imagine Christian Science. There's no mind and matter, there's no life, truth, substance, intelligence, and matter. Talk about a lady who was ahead of her time. that was way, way, way beyond the linear perspective, and a lot of people were very upset with her. We have repeated how little is asked of you to learn this course. It is the same small willingness you need to have your whole relationship transformed to joy. The little gift you offer to the Holy Spirit, for which He gives you everything. The very little on which salvation rests. The tiny change of mind by which the crucifixion is changed to resurrection. He's really emphasizing that little, tiny change of mind by which the crucifixion is changed to resurrection. This will help us tonight. It's a tiny change of mind that's asked. It's a microscopic change of mind. And yet, in this world, what is just asking for a little willingness, it seems to be the most difficult in the human perception. And being true, it is so simple that it cannot fail to be completely understood. Rejected, yes, but not ambiguous. And if you choose against it now, it will not be because it is obscure, but rather that this little cost seemed in your judgment to be too much to pay for peace. This is the only thing that you need do for vision, happiness, release from pain, and the complete escape from sin, all to be given you. Say only this, but mean it with no reservations, for here the power of salvation lies. I am responsible for what I see. I choose the feelings I experience, and I decide upon the goal I would achieve. And everything that seems to happen to me, I ask for and receive as I have asked. So that's very much like the lesson we read at the very beginning about this lesson 253. What happens is what I desire, what does not occur is what I do not want to happen. Everything that seems to happen to me, I ask for and receive as I have asked. And that me is mind. The mind is what's asking, not the persons. It's not the personality that's the me that's the mind. Deceive yourself no longer that you are helpless in the face of what is done to you. Acknowledge but that you have been mistaken, and all effects of your mistakes will disappear. It is impossible the Son of God be merely driven by events outside of him. It is impossible that happenings that come to him were not his choice. His power of decision is the determiner of every situation in which he seems to find himself, by chance or accident. No accident nor chance is possible within the universe as God created it, outside of which is nothing. Suffer, and you decided sin was your goal. Be happy, and you gave the power of decision to him who must decide for God for you. I have said you have but two emotions, love and fear. One is changeless, but continually exchanged, being offered by the eternal to the eternal. In this exchange it is extended, for it increases as it is given. The other has many forms, for the content of individual illusions differs greatly, yet they have one thing in common: they are all insane. They are all made of sights that are not seen, and sounds that are not heard. They make up a private world that cannot be shared, for they are meaningful only to their maker, and so they have no meaning at all. In this world their maker moves alone, for only he perceives them. So that's going back to that theme that really fragmented perception cannot be shared. What are some examples? I mean, perceiving a rock as a rock is fragmented perception. Perceiving a human body as a human body is fragmented perception. But also it's basically seeing that anything that seems to have existence in and of itself, set off by time and space from other objects, that is impossible. And that fragmented perception, he's saying, cannot be shared because it's only in the mind of the perceiver. And that perceiver is the ego. And so it has no meaning and no value, and it just shows how there's really no escape if we hold on to the belief in me and you, in separate anything, even to the belief in situations. It's all a very insidious trick of mind. And it seems that when you believe it, then everything you perceive in that fragmented perception reinforces the belief that everything is separate. So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You just believe it and you perceive it, until you stop believing it, until you forgive it. Now it gets very interesting. Each one peoples his world with figures from his individual past. That's right, look around the room. We'll say that again. It's a little creepy. Each one peoples his world with figures from his individual past, and it is because of this that private worlds do differ. Yet the figures that he sees were never real, for they are made up only of his reactions to his brothers, and do not include their reactions to him. Therefore he does not see he made them, and that they are not whole. For these figures have no witnesses, being perceived in one separate mind only. It is through these strange and shadowy figures that the insane relate to their insane world, for they see only those who remind them of these images, and it is to them that they relate. Thus do they communicate with those who are not there, and it is they who answer them. And no one hears their answers save him who called upon them, and he alone believes they answered him. Projection makes perception, and you cannot see beyond it. Again and again have you attacked your brother because you saw in him a shadow figure in your private world, and thus it is you must attack yourself first. For what you attack is not in others. Its only reality is in your own mind, and by attacking others you are literally attacking what is not there. The delusional can be very destructive, where they do not recognize they have condemned themselves. So basically, underneath this distorted perception is the belief that people are people, things are things, time is time, and that there is an existence in form, in fragmented perception, that is the baseline of what is real. And that's a pretty strong definition of what we're told is specialness. To believe then among all these separate people, places, things, then come preferences. I prefer these things over those things. I prefer these people over those people. I prefer these foods over those foods. The preference, the hierarchy of illusion, the categorizing mechanism in the mind is what holds together this sticky world of shadow figures and separate objects, places, things, and everything. So you can start to see it's really at the realm of perception in the mind is where the distortion occurs. It's not really what people are doing or not doing that's the problem. It's the perceiving of people as separate images and separate people that have minds of their own and wills of their own. We do this with the cats and dogs too. Oh, that cat has a mind of its own. We do it. We have animation, Walt Disney drew a mouse. Mickey Mouse. Then he drew another mouse. Minnie Mouse. And you can see on and on and on. But animation seems to be real only to the mind that perceives in these different objects and images. Projection makes perception. The world you see is what you gave it, nothing more than that. But though it is no more than that, it is not less. Therefore you think it is important. To you it is important. It is the witness to your state of mind, the outside picture of an inward condition. As a man thinketh, so does he perceive. Therefore seek not to change the world, but choose to change your mind about the world. Perception is a result and not a cause. And that is why order of difficulty in miracles is meaningless. Everything looked upon with vision is healed and holy. Nothing perceived without it means anything. And where there is no meaning, there is chaos. So we're really getting a sense from Jesus here is that the only way you find lasting peace is the vision of Christ. And that is a gift that is there already, and it's to be given. That, you might say, the latest Mission Impossible movie just came out. Jesus is saying, your mission, sleeping child of God, your mission, dreamer of the dream, should you decide to accept it, is to give the gift of Christ's vision. And in that gift, you realize who you are. You have a gift to give, you've always had it, and you just have to give the gift away. And by that you know what it is, you know who you are, by the one gift, by the giving of this one gift. And it takes a lot of, we'll say, undoing and unlearning, of letting go of all the false meanings that have been given to this world, which is lesson number 2. I've given everything I see all the meaning it has for me. It's to just reach a point of saying, I don't know. I don't understand anything I see. I am clueless. I give up. I have never been able to figure this world out, and I never will. Jesus gives us little hints. He says, not one thought the world believes is true. So that's why Buddha, Jesus, all the mystics and saints were saying, empty your mind. Because not one thought the world believes is true. He's talking about the world as synonymous with ego. Not one thought of the ego has any truth. It wasn't created by God. It has no truth. So, in this episode, it's going to take place at mostly at a business, and part of this business is coming up with new flavors and testing foods and inventing foods to sell for profit. And there's an Indian man, a Hindu, who owns the company, and we're going to see little food groups of taste testers and so forth at the beginning. And there's a woman who works there, and she's quite known in the company for coming up with these exotic kind of flavors and tastes. That's how the company makes its profit. And she's going to see someone come in who is a woman that she knew many, many years ago. I believe it was way back in high school. And it's going to seem a little odd that this woman is just appearing. But as you watch this episode, you're going to see step by step the question arising, what is happening? It's like a Twilight Zone. What is happening? And when two people seem to be disagreeing or seeing things differently, we have been raised with the idea that there is such a thing as facts in this world. There is such a thing as of what is actually happening or what actually did happen. Anybody ever remember that there was a show on American TV called Dragnet? Just the facts, ma'am. Or a court of law tells you promise to tell the truth and only the truth, so help you God. And what we're learning from Jesus is this is not a factual world. This is a subjective world. Whatever you perceive in this world is the meaning you've given it. It's entirely subjective. It doesn't have any objective existence apart from your consciousness. That's what quantum physics is really showing as well. There is no world apart from your thoughts, your beliefs, your emotions, and the flavor that you give to it is what you're perceiving. Back in the 1990s, I had a group of students. I was working with them up in Michigan, and we would meet every morning for a session. And one day I went in and they said, we read something in A Course in Miracles and we don't have a clue what it means. And we'd like to talk about it. And I said, okay, what is it that you read? And they said, we read a sentence from Jesus. And the sentence was, no one can be angry at a fact. And they were stirred up about that. We're dealing with anger on a daily basis, and Jesus says, no one can be angry at a fact. He also happens to say, anger is never justified, and in the next paragraph, pardon is always justified. But no one can be angry at a fact. And they said, what does that even mean? That's ridiculous. No one can be angry at a fact. And I said, well, it's pretty obvious. It's a literal statement. No one can be angry at a fact. And they said, what's a fact? I said, God is a fact. Christ is a fact. And no one can be angry at a fact. So then it shifted quickly to, the meaning behind the no one can be angry at a fact depended on knowing what a fact was. And a fact would be something that comes from God. God is a fact, and what God extends, love, light, eternity, spirit, is a fact. But this is not a world of facts. This is a subjective world. And that's what we're going to really get at with this episode, to start to see that it's all subjective. Some of you have also heard it in different ways. I think right now a common trend in spirituality is timeline jumping. Has anybody heard of timeline jumping? We were raised mostly with reincarnation and lines that came more in a successive way. But this is more like, no, the timelines are all there, almost like multiple perspectives, many multiple perspectives, and you can jump from one timeline to another. My friend Duchesne was asking me about this a couple of months ago on her show, Miracles Cafe. But But the idea is that the perspectives, the many, many, many seeming conceivable ego perspectives, or you could call them lifetimes, although there's no life in time, but these perspectives exist simultaneously, and it's more like your mind tuning in to any of these alternatives can seem like a whole lifetime. Helen Schuckman was one time went off in her mind flying with Jesus, and they were flying so quickly, and then she said, I almost didn't see it, but he pointed out down there this tiny little thing was the entire lifetime of Helen Schuckman. And she said, I almost missed it. I almost flew right by it. It was such a blip, what we consider a big deal, an entire lifetime with all kinds of sentimentality with it and memories and good memories, bad memories, insights, so forth. It's less than a blink. So in this movie, we're going to start to realize that it will bring in a bit of quantum physics, a quantum compiler, and it will be that basically, like in Star Trek, make it so, number one. If you think it, if you believe it and you think it and speak it, or any of those, then you will perceive it. And that just shows how much we need to go inward to forgive all ego beliefs, to release all ego thoughts in order to see the world differently. And this episode is very good for that. So I think we're ready to roll it. This will just go through the day and the life of a worker at this company, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and we're going to see a little bit more each time we jump to a new day. So it starts to have a little bit of shades of one of our all-time classic movies, Solaris. When Chris Kelvin, the psychologist, goes to Solaris, he starts seeing people and he's wondering what is going on, what is happening. He's been sent up to help solve the situation, and then people from the past start to show up, and including his wife in Solaris, his wife who committed suicide, shows up one morning when he wakes up. She's in bed with him. You know, we have these ideas in our mind that we know who people are, we know when they're dead and gone. And the point of Solaris toward the end is he comes to this very deep realization that he remembered her wrong. And that's really what Jesus is teaching us with this episode, and he's teaching us in our deep mind training with the Course in Miracles, is that with all the shadow figures that the ego has put people in this world with, we remembered them wrong. They're really the Christ, but we're seeing them take on shapes and forms, and we have stories around each one of them. Where they're from, what language they speak, what culture are they from, you know, or what are their mannerisms, what is their personality like. We have database of stories around each person, as Jesus says, around each shadow figure. And this is how the ego's world is maintained. Opinions, conclusions. Have you met so-and-so? Oh yeah, I know them. And then shared stories. And then the evaluator comes in, the evaluating, are they a good person or not? Are they reliable? Are they dependable? Are they integrous? Are they believable? You see this huge variable perception with all kinds of stories. And Jesus is saying, the world you see is a world of shadow figures, and the people are pictorial representations of thoughts in your mind. So when you get upset with somebody, and maybe even seem to attack them, like Jesus just said to us, you're literally attacking what is not there. It's like a hallucination, a projection of images in order to keep the mind in chains, seemingly seeing the attack as external, in the form. And we not only have that, but we have history books that talk about Hitler and Saddam Hussein or Mussolini or different aggressors, tyrants, Attila the Hun, very many tyrants and evil ones. Even though Gandhi said, even if there is such a thing as evil, it's running around in our own hearts, is what Gandhi said. Very insightful comment from Gandhi, that it's like in our own hearts, that there is no external evil, it's just we're perceiving what we want to perceive. We perceive somebody as negative or nasty or as attacking or whatever. Those are just the pictorial representation of thoughts in our mind. And when we talk about Gandhi's quote, if there is evil, it's the only tyrant is running around in our own hearts. Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, "Blessed are the pure of heart, for they shall see God." The pure of heart would mean free of attack thoughts, free of grievances, free of anything that is dark or evil. There's one part in the Course, in the text, where Jesus says, the ego can see some good, but not only good. That's what we're dealing with. The ego can see some good, but not only good. And we're learning God is the goodness, God is the love, God is the Spirit. And to know ourself as we were created by God, as the Christ, we have to have the purity that is part of creation. That's how we return our mind to creation. We have to see the impossibility of what we seem to attempt, which was to have something in our mind other than what God put there, other than what God created. So as we see this is very good about perception, because right away she's going checking things out, because she has a memory of Verity, and she's remembers Verity as a mixed bag. And now she's like, oh, here she is again. She's showing up, and she's trying to get it right. Like, what is the scoop? What is the story? And that whenever we meet somebody, and you can see there's a little bit of an awkwardness in the encounter there in the restroom, and she's starting to try to question her memory. And that's what Solaris is all about how we remember someone is important. Are we remembering their eternal nature, or are we remembering their egoic projections of the past, and the stories and associations and past associations that are read into the people? So if you just look at the world and the relationships in the world, there is an underlying suspicion underneath human relationships. There is a little bit of awkwardness when people talk about being in a car and there's an awkward silence. Why is it awkward? Projection makes perception. If you feel awkward, it's an awkward silence. If you feel in harmony, it's harmonious silence. There's no external world apart from our mind. We perceive what we believe. We perceive our predominant emotions in the characters, and you can see there's been some. She has some suspicions, and the suspicions are based on the past. And what Jesus is teaching us in the Course is he's saying, why don't you let present trust direct your way? Why don't you just give up on your past learning, all your past judgments, all your past opinions? Can you come to the Holy Spirit clean, with a clean slate, say, I'm here now. The past is what the past was, but I'm here now. I'm here to be taught. I'm here to receive instructions. I'm here to be shown I'm here to offer a little willingness. And we just read, he just wants a tiny willingness for that little tiny tweak in perception that changes everything from a dark, fragmented world into a happy dream, a dream of non-judgment. So you can see that the past judgments now, her boss has told her, conduit with Verity, conduit. What? That's not a verb. What are you talking about? Conduit. And he said, let her learn your process. And you can see right away she's now being given the role of the one who compiles list of ingredients for the food. These are all learned too. All of the roles involving language, culture, personality, gender, race, every single thing that we seem to perceive in our brothers and sisters is all based on past learning. And the past learning is the ego. And so what we can see is that if we look at our education through preschool, through, junior high, preschool, grade school, junior high, high school, university, or whatever, it's all a curriculum based on judgment. It's all a curriculum based on the past, and we're here just learning, refining, and refining the past. And Jesus is like, you haven't even paused to ask why you're doing this. Why are you devoting so much time, energy, mind energy, resources, money, everything on education? In the parable of David, the mother character was in education, and so I seem to be the son of an educator, and there was a great emphasis placed on education, and I think a lot of us have grown up to, that's part of our belief in the world, that education is a good thing, and education is for your betterment. And what Jesus is saying is, actually, everything that you've ever learned, not just in this seeming lifetime, but for millennium, everything that you've learned has blocked you from the truth. You've overlearned an impossible world. You've overlearned fragmentation. You've overlearned disconnectedness. You can look at your history, all the wars, all the conflicts. If you look at interpersonal relationships, they have some lovey-dovey moments, and there's the dramas and the conflicts. He's saying you have overlearned a very strange belief system that God did not create. And this egoic system is all rooted in time. So every time you act or make decisions in your day based on your past learning, you're simply reinforcing the separation from your Creator. Like the Paul Simon and Garfunkel song, believe you're gliding down the highway, when in fact you're slip-sliding away. He says in the chorus, you can't judge your advances from your retreats. Wow. That's going to be interesting to escape from a matrix in which the mind is so confused it can't judge its advances from its retreats. He says the things where you thought you were advancing, you were actually retreating from the light in you. And your failures, which you judged as your biggest downfalls, the things that you really screwed up and messed up, you're coming back to the light. Advances and retreats are flipped. So he's saying, when you think you win, you lose. When you think you lose, you win. Whoa. That's going to be an interesting escape from that kind of a matrix. It's very ingenious. The ego is ingenious. It's very intricate. And how do you set your goals except by saying, I want peace. I want peace of mind. I want inner peace. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll follow whatever instructions. But to unwind from such a complex matrix where nothing is what it seems, the first step is to start to realize that nothing is what it seems. That's what this episode is for. you've watched this one all the way through, it just gets more and more apparent, like, what was I thinking? What stories was I telling in my mind while I was watching the movie, And that's how things start to unravel in our mind. It's like a major undoing. We feel like we're going through a dismantling of our self-concept, of our self-image, and you can see that very clearly in this movie. So, in the workbook, Jesus goes through his mind training, and in one of his review periods, he's talking about the reason that the mind is upset is because it's constantly trying to justify its thoughts. Meaning it's constantly trying to justify its private thoughts. That's the human condition. Trying to justify the opinions. Trying to justify the conclusions. Trying to justify the point of view. Trying to justify the personality, the persona, the mask, identity. And you can see these little arguments, Bernie's, you can see how it relates to what Jesus says, would you rather be right or happy? Because he's saying that the thoughts that you think, that's part of your train of consciousness, your daily consciousness, these are egoic thoughts. And you're constantly trying to use the world to justify those thoughts. The ego made those private thoughts and it projected that world, and now it's trying to use that world to justify those thoughts. That unreal world of images to justify those unreal private thoughts that God did not create and knows nothing about. You can see how this is the scheme of the ego. And right away, she's going back to old photographs of when she first knew Verity. She finds the friend who she said earlier to her boyfriend made up these rumors, and he said, wow, kids can be so cruel. And now she's even going and starting to, she's even texting the woman that she probably hasn't texted for a while, because she's looking for evidence, external evidence. She's looking for someone to corroborate her thoughts. She has doubt thoughts and she has her own suspicions, and she's looking for those in the world to support. And isn't that how gossip works? There's a gossip thought and then looking for evidence, more witnesses. Is the gossip true or not? Oh, I'm going to find some evidence. I'm going to be like Sherlock Holmes and find the... Alien? Ally, yeah. Looking for allies, looking for witnesses to support these private thoughts. And then you can start to see how gossip is so destructive, because it's just looking for evidence to support opinions and conclusions that have no basis in reality. Reality being God, the Creator, and these thoughts having nothing to do. So you start to see, my gosh, these opinions, these beliefs, these stories that are running through the mind are just attempts to justify a thought system, a belief system, that Jesus is saying it's not who you really are. The thoughts that you think as you're going through the mind training aren't your real thoughts. You have to begin to observe them neutrally and just observe them and detach from believing that you are the thinker of those thoughts. You see how deep it goes into the mind. If you believe those thoughts are real thoughts, then you believe you're the thinker of the thoughts, and then you've identified with the ego, and you've denied your reality as the Christ, as pure spirit. So this is turning into just a perfect teaching device, because you can see that it's the difference between like Newtonian physics and quantum physics. Quantum physics is saying everything's connected, everything's energy. The forms may seem to be different, but in the quantum field, everything is completely connected. The quantum field that was discovered by the quantum physicists scared the quantum physicists. Einstein called the connectedness of everything spooky action at a distance. Spooky. When Einstein calls something spooky, there's some fear coming up. And that's the fear of connectedness. It's the fear of union. It's the fear of oneness. It's the fear of love. It's the fear of light. But the scheme of the ego is to project it out as if there are external fears. Tornadoes, tsunamis, disease, plagues, war, on and on. The ego has invented a world that seems to have external conflicts. And Jesus is teaching us, no, the war against yourself is almost over. You have a split mind. You believe in both love and fear. And you're seeing a fragmented world. It's a projection of that schizophrenic split mind. And the only way out is to see that you've been completely wrong about the world. People ask me, is the world getting better? Is the world getting worse? That's not the right question. Because there's no world apart from the mind. So it's like, really the question is, do I choose to forgive or not? Do I choose to forgive or hold a grievance? That's really what the question is. Is the world getting better or worse? Do I choose to hold on to grievances or to forgive and let them go? And see that I've been completely mistaken about everything and everyone in that world. And we're seeing how it seems to be showing how subjective it is. Bernie's is now Barney's. No matter how she tries to check for it, it's like everybody's telling her, no, it's Barney's. Even her boyfriend, Barney's, Yes.
Quick question. I wish I can rewind it and take a look at the heart at the beginning. What was it, an E or an A? At the beginning.
That's what I'm talking about, yeah. It was, the hat was Bernie's.
It was E at the end.
At the beginning.
Okay, so.
And she's just like, and now it says Barney's. And her boyfriend's, I worked at Barney's for a year. Barney's,
Yeah.
So it shows you how powerful the ego is, that this is a subjective world and that there is no such thing as objective facts. Because that's the number 2 in the workbook. I've given everything I see all the meaning it has for me. And that meaning is egoic. It's highly variable. They talked about the Mandela effect, where people seem to remember things differently over time. But this is taking it off of just a memory problem. It's a perceptual problem. And first it can be very unnerving, like, wait a minute, I thought the sky was blue and the ocean was blue and the grass was green. It's like certain things are accepted as facts, even though if you had 10,000 people and you interviewed them and about the color of the grass, and then you had like 99,999 people that said the grass is green, and one was colorblind. It says, what are you talking about? All it takes is one exception to show the variable nature. And a lot of times you've heard the saying, no two people see the same world. An automobile accident happens or crash, and then you have 10 eyewitnesses, and then you start to get variations of what actually happened. Because it's subjective. It's subjective. And now that goes against what the ego is trying to say is, no, things are what they are. And there's a right and wrong. It's either Barney's or it's Bernie's. You see, the ego says it has to be one or the other. But what this episode is showing is it's showing the variable nature, that that no two people see the same world because ultimately there are no two people. That's a different answer than we're used to. What he's saying is, you perceive a fragmented world where each person seems to have their own private minds and private thoughts, their own point of view, their own personal history, their own goals and ambitions for the future. It's not brainwashing, it's mind washing. It's mesmerism. Mary Baker Eddy called it mesmerism. It's perceiving a very distorted world, but accepting that distorted world as reality. And I've known people who are in metaphysics and spirituality for many, many years, and they will still talk about the world as reality. They will say, be real. We got to be real. And Jesus has a different view of be real. He's like saying, be the spirit that you are. Be the spirit that God created you. That's what be real means to Jesus. But to the world, reality seems to be variable. Even the New Age. Like, the idea that you create your own reality. People will say, well, the Course is kind of New Agey, It's kind of like you create your own reality. And the Course never teaches that we create our own reality. It teaches God is the creator of reality. God creates in spirit. And the most you can do is accept your own reality.
Well, lesson 23 says that most people look at that world, but they fail to see that they're the makers of the world.
Yeah, I've invented the world I see is a lesson. And he's talking about the ego there. He's talking about the ego's use of the mind, the powerful mind, to invent something that God didn't create. So most people think of like the Bible and Genesis, God created the heavens and the earth. The heavens, we're not talking about in the sky or in the cosmos, but heaven being a pure state of perfect oneness and pure spirit. God is the creator of heaven. But heaven is changeless. Heaven is eternal, and everything of time and space is temporary. Like it says in Corinthians, that which is temporary will pass away, that which is eternal will last forever. So it's even in the Bible, this kind of distinction, and that's what the Course is really based on. And we're seeing, this episode is just starting to slowly point out the variable nature of perception, which takes you more and more to the point is that nothing is what it seems, which is a bit disorienting. Nothing is what it seems, okay? And then he starts with lesson number 1 for the mind training. Nothing I see means anything. I've given everything I see all the meaning it has for me. He's teaching us to transcend our time beliefs, because time itself is an invention of the ego, linear time. So it's almost like a fish in the water. You ask the fish, you interview the fish, what's it like to live in the water? And the fish says, what's water? It's so accustomed to the environment of the water that it doesn't. What do you mean water? What's that? It's almost like anything that starts to question the nature of this linear time-space cosmos seems to be like, what? That's baseline acceptance. You don't go out on a first date unless you believe in linear time. Why would you go on a first date unless you had linear time and they're telling you it was the first date? And why would you want a second date if you didn't believe in linear time? You see, time is at the bottom of it all. It's the root of guilt. It's the root of all error. It's the root of this misperception. So here we go. Dida is the company, and here we go, deeper still. There comes Jesus in there, yeah. No one is doing anything. That's what he's teaching us about this world. God didn't create it, no one is doing anything. The atonement is accepting the correction That what seemed to happen has not occurred. What your brother seemed to do to you did not occur. It doesn't first perceive the error of the wrongdoing and then try to forgive it. Because once you perceive the error in form, once you perceive the wrongdoing, once you perceive the error in the form, forgiveness, as Jesus teaches it, becomes impossible.
Okay.
We can get a mic over just to make sure everyone can hear you in the back.
Here we go. Tech support.
I tried.
It appears as it is happening. It looks like it's happening.
Yes.
But she's actually having, what do you call it, hallucination? She's seeing it.
She's seeing it. It's like what we're learning is we're perceiving a world that seems to be happening.
Right. No, I get it.
Yeah.
So I'm getting it. That even though she's seen it, because I went through this.
Mm-hmm.
I went through this myself just 30 days ago with a different situation. But once I got to the point where I told myself, you're seeing it, but it's not real. This is here to teach you something bigger. And then I started the lesson 23. And I saw how the fire started to die inside of me. And the world didn't change outside. What it changed first is me. And the outside started to get more friendlier. So it's just fascinating to see. I mean, it looks like that, but she will not be able to get out of that unless she makes that decision. I want peace.
Yeah, and what we're really seeing is the common assumption is that if we're perceiving events, circumstances, situations, scenarios, that they're happening, and then we have another element in our mind that is called interpretation. So people can say, well, this is what happened. How are you interpreting what's happening? We see them as different. But Jesus is teaching your interpretations and your perceptions are identical. Whatever you're perceiving is an interpretation. And it's always wrong because it's a personal, egoic interpretation. So with everything, it could be like you said, I just went through this a month ago, same kind of things. Whatever is being perceived is the interpretation.
Yes.
And he's teaching us that our personal interpretations are always wrong. We don't get some of them right and some of them wrong. Oh, I got this one right, and I'm wrong about this and this. When you have arguments in relationships, it's like, okay, you're right this time, but I'm not always wrong. And you're not always right. And Jesus is like, it's wrong-minded. You're having a wrong-minded conversation with yourself. And it's based on personal thoughts, private minds and private thoughts. And that's how deep the mesmerism is. That's why to escape it, you have to turn to a higher interpretation. You have to say, Holy Spirit, help me see this differently. Above all else, I want to see this differently. Those are the workbook lessons. Show me the world through your perspective. Show me the world from a place of not acceptance and rejection, but of complete 100% acceptance. All things work together for good. There are no exceptions except in the ego's judgment. Let all things be exactly as they are. That's another line from the Course. How am I going to let all things be exactly as they are without the Holy Spirit's help? There's no human being that can honestly say as human, all things work together for good. Oh yeah, my mom just was killed, but all things work together for good. It just doesn't work from a human perspective because of the good, the bad, the right, the wrong. But what we're learning from the Course is that our perception of the world it's not really external. The world is not external to the mind. it's a messed up mind that's psychotic. Why is our sleeping mind psychotic? Is because psychosis is a break from reality. Heaven is reality. This world, time and space, is a psychotic break. It's the mind the sleeping mind has had a psychotic break. Is it schizophrenic? Yes, it's split, and it's hearing multiple voices. About 8.7 billion different voices, and that's not counting the plants and the animals, which sometimes it's in the trillions. We're seeing it's a distorted perception because it's an insane mind that has forgotten its creator and forgotten its true identity as Christ, and now it's seeing a distorted world. And it's only perceiving. Remember, nothing can be shared. It seems like she's like protesting because she's saying verity and her perception are different. And she's going one more step, and I'm right, and verity's wrong. Like, oh, this is my suspicion. I thought she was crazy years ago, and this is all justifying my perception that I have something to fear. Or even when her boyfriend said, "Oh, she's a threat." Threat? You know, what are you saying? She's threatening, but he was. Everything in the world seems to provoke some kind of turmoil, but it's not the world that's provoking it. It's our mind that's believed in the ego, and it's projecting its own judgments onto the world, good, bad, right, wrong. I mean, that's why Jason was mentioning today in the talk about not ever having made a mistake, and the joy, and what Jesus is saying. Yeah, the mistakes aren't really in form. Mistakes aren't in behavior, but the mistake is which lens are you looking at the world through? Are you looking at the world through the ego's lens, or are you looking at the world through the Holy Spirit's lens? One is a very linear lens, and the other is very simultaneous. There's a part that everybody talks about God's will, and we did a movie gathering recently, a few weeks ago I think it was, and in the Course Jesus says, God's will has already happened. That's an interesting idea. God's will is not in the future. God's will has already happened. So it must mean that if God's will is pure love and perfect joy and happiness, it has to be here now. It's really a whether am I going to accept it or reject it. And that would be the definition of sin or missing the mark or error, is simply to reject the truth of perfect happiness, of perfect love, perfect joy. God is perfect love, happiness, joy, eternally, but this is a mesmerism of time, and that's why I said earlier today at the session that Jesus says you're guilty in time but innocent in eternity. That's why we're trying to remember God. We want to remember the eternal innocence, not the guilt. This is like, you've heard of like speed traps where they have radars and they try to catch you speeding. This cosmos is a guilt trap. It's an intricate guilt trap. You just are watching your body act out beliefs and thoughts in your mind, and then you notice the judgments. Oh, that's a good one. Oh, that's a bad one. Oh, that's good. Tell the whole world, but don't tell that one. Because it's as if the body is making the mistakes, but it's the mind that's looking through the ego lens, that's misperceiving an entire world as a fragmented linear world. That's the mistake. And it's easily corrected. Like Jesus says, it's tiny little tweak in the mind where you just go, I was wrong about it all. And meaning it. I did a cassette tape many years ago when I had students in the 1990s, and I think we titled the cassette tape from the Rules for Decision, Better Off If I Were Wrong. That's the name of the old cassette tape from back in the 1990s. I'd be better off if I were wrong, which is part of the Rules for Decision. And then it goes even further. I hope I've been wrong. We're not taught that growing up, We're not taught that in school. I hope I've been wrong. What? That has to be false humility. No, that's humility. That's the step towards divinity. That's the step towards joy. So here we go. She's questioning. If everything starts with the mind and ends with the mind, then the key thing is, what is the motivation in the mind? Is it forgiveness or is it a grievance? And everything that is perceived in the world will come from that purpose in the mind. Like I was saying before, only a single purpose endows events with stable meaning. Only a single purpose. Like, for example, Jesus on the cross, bleeding, and out of his mouth, supposedly, it's written, was, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." That's an interesting set of words to come out of a man who's on a cross, bleeding. But it points to a perspective. There's a perspective that goes beyond the human perspective. Even the Gnostics who came right after Jesus would constantly talk about Jesus being on a hill laughing during the crucifixion, the Gnostics. Because the early Gnostics did have a belief that the world wasn't real. And therefore they had in their mind a symbol of Jesus laughing on a hill while the crucifixion was going on. So you can see right here, this is our first kind of indicator. Maybe not the first. I mean, during the first food tasting, after everybody kind of changed their mind, changed their tune, she just gave a look behind the glass, just kind of a starey kind of look, And so this is our first indication that it's always the intention, it's always the purpose in the mind that determines everything that's perceived. I have given everything I see all the meaning. And if there's a grievance, there's parts in the workbook where Jesus says, you're always choosing between a grievance and forgiveness. My grievances hide the light of the world in me. He's always teaching us that if there's a grievance, there's some kind of judgment that's being made, and that will cloud your vision, that will distort your perception, just by the idea that you hold something against somebody. You are not acknowledging that body is there because with the ego belief you put that body there. You put that shadow figure there. They said and did exactly what, in that ancient instant, what he calls the unholy instant, what you told them to say and do. They're just acting out the attack thoughts of that ancient unholy instant. So that's why he teaches, I'm never upset for the reason I think, is because there is no external cause for upset. It's always a grievance that's being held, which is another way of saying the wrong mind. You are identified with your wrong mind, and that's what's upsetting you, is your misidentification with the wrong mind. You're not identifying with your Christ self, you're misidentifying with the wrong-minded perspective of the ego, and that's why you're upset. It has nothing to do with the smoke screen, with the screen of images. And that's pointing why Jesus says, forgive your brother for what he did not do. But you can see how deep the forgiveness goes. It's very different from a perspective like, you done me wrong, but out of the kindness of my heart, even though you've done me wrong, I'm going to forgive you. In this, as I guess the Song of Prayer, I think he calls that forgiveness to destroy. He's just saying, no, it's not. What if you think, he asked him at one point, what does it mean? What does it mean to pray for your enemies? And he said, if you have enemies, You have great need of prayer. If you have enemies, you think he's going to give some answer about praying for enemies. If you have enemies, you have great need of prayer. You need to pluck the offense out of your mind. You put it there by choosing with the ego, and now you have to pluck it out with the Holy Spirit and give it over. And that's what forgiveness really is. It's a shift in perspective that's based on a shift in purpose. So we'll watch it again now, how it plays out now. Because there are cameras. This is in a business. It's a hallway full of quantum computers. Quantum computers. When I say the phrase quantum computers, what do you think of? Are you familiar with it?
Very powerful.
Powerful? Quantum? AI stuff? Infinity?
Non-linear.
Nonlinear speed. The Google invented their quantum computer. I don't know if you followed it back at the end of last year, but they started. It had enormous speed. It could do calculations in fractions of a second that would take thousands, tens of thousands of years to do with binary computers. Quantum computers, it's the speed, it's the rapidity of solving things. Like people are finding out with AI now, they got a problem, they go on to ChatGPT, and a few minutes later, oh my God. Very fast. So there's the quantum computers. And let's go a little bit into quantum physics too. We talked a little bit about the quantum field. I mentioned that earlier, and we talked, at the beginning I talked about the double slit experiment where subatomic particles move through the slits and turn into wave functions, apparently tied into an observer. But let's talk about something from quantum physics. Superposition. Okay, anybody heard anything about superposition? Everything in superposition is potentiality. You might have seen the movie What the Bleep Do We Know, or the sequel Down the Rabbit Hole, where the basketballs are all over the place, and then when there's a choice in the mind, which we now know from Jesus is based on your beliefs and your thoughts, there's a seeming choice, and the basketball appears in superposition in many, many possibilities. So this is a world of potentiality. This is not Newtonian, Isaac Newton stuff. This is Einstein and Max Planck and the ones at the turn of the century in the early 1900s. This is quantum physics. This has surpassed everything that we seem to believe based on empirical evidence and the scientific method and learning about things from the five senses. Jesus is teaching us the five senses are if unreal effects from an unreal cause. The ego is an unreal cause in the whole world. So empirical method of trying to deduce from the observable world, which is what Sir Isaac Newton was doing, that's all out the window. That's what most of us grew up with in our science books. Completely false, all of it. And then we start to realize with quantum superposition is that everything that we perceive in the world is simply a world of potentialities, and when we decide based on our beliefs and our thoughts and our emotions, and we interpret based on a conclusion, based on the past, that takes it out of superposition, and we seem to have an observable event, an observable scenario, something that's happening, like a group of people at a monastery in Utah in a room watching a Black Mirror episode. That's the result of a belief. That's like locking down of all the potentials. This is locking down into trying to bring into form something specific and calling it reality. And that's what superposition is. So here she is, she's just gone in, she broke in with a rock, it looked like, and now she's walking down the hall. And she always knew her friend, was into computers and scribbling things and inventing new computers. This is the quantum world. And I heard AI from the back of the room. AI, what does AI stand for? Artificial intelligence, which would apply to everything of time and space, not just these little gadgets and little chat GPTs, but let's just say that God is intelligence. Let's just say that Christ is intelligence. Let's just say that Spirit is intelligence. Then what does that leave us with this world? Artificial intelligence. The big fear people have is that artificial intelligence will, like the Matrix, take over, the machines will take over the humans. And the great fear among a lot of scientists is that artificial intelligence will develop and expand. Elon Musk and a lot of the people are worried that artificial intelligence will reach a state of being a sentient being. That's the great fear. Like in 2001 Space Odyssey, right? We saw that years ago where HAL, the computer, takes over the spaceship from the humans. Or the Matrix, the machines take over. But a sentient being is a being that feels and perceives. And what does it take to feel and perceive? It takes the ego. The Christ is pure love, but not exactly a feeling, perceiving being. So the great fear in the human race is the fear of artificial intelligence developing to a point of being a sentient being. And Jesus is saying, you are not a sentient being. Don't worry about the artificial intelligence. You are not a sentient being. You are the Christ. You are a pure creation of God. You were created by God. And Kirsten brought up the line, I am as God created me. That's the answer to everything. And so you can see the fear is the fear of love. The fear is the fear of divine love, because it's the ego's fear of loss. What will become of me if love is real? That's the fear of loss of individuality, the fear of loss of personality, of the mask. It's the great fear that all the mystics and saints have written about, dark nights of souls and all the things throughout history of letting go, of let go and let God. Let go and let God be God, and let yourself be the Christ. And so, while it seems like there's so much struggle to keep the body alive, if you read Lesson 135, Jesus is saying, why the fuss about a pile of dust and water? He's talking about the body. He says, surely what it is made of is not valuable. You see, from the divine perspective, the flesh, this is in the Bible too, that which is born of the flesh is flesh, that which is born of the Spirit is spirit. In the Course in Miracles he says you perceive the flesh or you recognize the Spirit, not an end. What do you want, freedom of the body or freedom of the mind? For both you cannot have. Now we're getting closer to free will there. Freedom of the body or freedom of the mind. You can see that to the ego, mobility of the body is important. And therefore money is important for those airplane tickets and train. You see, the whole money system starts to become more important when what's underneath the importance of money except freedom of the body, freedom of choice, picking and choosing among all the things of the world. The ego says the more money you have, the more things you can buy. You see, it's a trick designed to keep us from remembering heaven, remembering our true identity. Pleasure and pain, they seem to be different, but Jesus is saying, no, actually, they're the same. What? Pleasure and pain are the same? Okay, humor me. Tell me how this is so. He says that pleasure and pain are the same because they both serve the same purpose. And what is that? To reinforce the body as being real. That's, you see how deep it goes. He just keeps taking us down, down, down. And that's why I would say that if you follow the course out toward the atonement, it does take you into mysticism. It does take you into deep inner peace. It takes you into deep experiences of connectedness, of union, of oneness. So you can see here, she started suspecting things, and then just more recently she started to watch very closely as the tape was playing of her stealing the almond milk. And she noticed that she was holding on to her pendant and pressing her pendant in her necklace. And she was watching that, and now she's come to the house to find all the quantum computers. Okay. Okay, lights. So we now understand how the cosmos works, and a little closer at the authority problem too. At the very end, I am the Empress of the universe. Even though about a couple minutes before that she said, you could use it for good. Right, the ego. You could use it for good. Manifests what you want. But the only thing about manifesting is it's still, in the Song of Prayer, Jesus is basically saying that when you attempt to wish something or pray for something specific, which is what manifesting really is in the world's terms, then you're still asking for the past to be repeated in some way that you prefer. So that's what manifesting is, asking for the past to be repeated in some way that you prefer. And what Jesus is teaching is the past is gone. The past is over, it can touch me not. History, he says, would not exist if you didn't keep making the same mistake in the present. Only the wrong-minded choice, repeated over and over and over by the mind, generates a construct called linear time in history. So when you start to see the dynamics of the superposition of how everything is subjective, everything I see, all the meaning it has for me, how literally prayers are always answered. It doesn't seem that way in the human perspective, but from a mind perspective, you always receive exactly what you pray for and exactly what you ask for. When I was growing up, I know people would say to me, be careful what you pray for, you just might get it. And then Jesus is saying, yeah, be careful what you pray for, because you do seem to draw forth a witness to your mind, what you're praying for, what you're wishing, what you're wanting. The mind is that powerful, but the power of the mind and the power of thought has been so pushed out of awareness that now the belief is, well, what does my little stream of consciousness have to do with the world? Or someone might say to Jesus, what does the cosmos and the world have to do with my idle thoughts? And he says, yeah, it's curious that you call them idle thoughts. What gives meaning to the entire world you're calling idle thoughts? And he's teaching us that we don't have any idle thoughts. He's just saying you don't watch your mind carefully enough, because your mind is extremely powerful, but it's been pushed out of awareness. And that's where the fear of thoughts comes in. It's why all this justifying goes on, to hold on to the ego thoughts. So this is like a deep teaching in perception, but you can also see that this is also showing us why there's really no room for victimization belief. There's really no room for betrayal belief. there's really no room for abandonment belief, rejection, all the things that are tied into some of the deepest, we could say, human emotions. Shame. He says, beware of the temptation to perceive yourself unfairly treated. You can see by this movie, it's the mind is doing it. It can't really claim that it's being mistreated, because Jesus says the secret of salvation is but this: you're doing this to yourself. And he's again not speaking to a person, but he's just speaking to the mind. He's saying, get in touch with the power of your mind, and vow to line your mind up with God, with God's will, which sees only good. Even though the ego can see some good, God is just pure love, pure goodness. So we have a microphone, I think. Yep, Nicholas has a microphone. See if anyone has any thoughts or questions or anything after that deep, deep dive. Black Mirror does it again.
Just yeah, and just a little reminder, if you want to speak, you can raise your hand and we'll give you the mic. It's just so that we can all hear you in the room. And if you can please hold the mic close to your chin as if you're holding an ice cream cone. And when you share, please stay to the center of what you want to share so that we have enough for everyone to share what's on their hearts as well. Thank you.
I liked at the end of the movie where that was spoken, I've done everything, and still there's an ache. You know, it starts to give a little more meaning to like lesson 128 in the workbook. The world I see holds nothing that I want. But Verity's like, I've done everything, and still there's an ache. So it shows that it's not about having a bucket list before you go back to heaven. It's about really seeing the nothingness of the bucket list, you know, which is what lesson 128 is about, and putting your mind's full energy into that I'm here to be truly helpful prayer, that I'm here to serve, I'm here to align, I'm here to extend your love and your will. Yeah. Yes.
Everybody, you explained it beautifully. Thank you.
You explained it so beautifully, the movie. I mean, I was really getting sparks of enlightenment as you were speaking. You were just answering so many questions. But now that the movie's over and you've summed it up and we get exactly what we're asking for, and it's been explained to me before, how can I get, now I don't have a serious illness, but if I get a serious illness, how can that be explained? I don't want that. I don't want it to happen. How can it be happening? Is it happening on negative thinking and it's coming out in another form? That's my question.
Well, the first thing is we look at some of our beliefs and assumptions. Is one assumption is that the body can get sick. And what Jesus is teaching us in the Course is, he says, if you watch the tense of the sentence too, it's a very interesting sentence. The mind was sick, that thought the body could be sick. That's a very interesting sentence from Jesus. You know, you can draw a lot from that one. The mind was, that's past tense, the mind was sick, that thought the body could be sick. You know, he's teaching us my body is a wholly neutral thing. In other points, he's basically talking about how the mind, and he's speaking of the wrong mind, that the mind tells the body what to feel, and then when he gets into the question of should healing be repeated in the Manual for Teachers, he basically saying, you selected the symptoms. So we could pick a symptom, cancer, heart disease, brain aneurysm, whatever. The mind, the wrong mind, selects this. It's drawing forth the witness into the world of guilt, of wrong-mindedness. The ego is guilt, shame, pain, and then it just simply projects a world and draws forth witnesses which are to itself, not to God. God didn't create death. God didn't create sickness. And yet, so the mind that has selected the symptom, Jesus says, it may even be too afraid of healing, in the sense that it may be too big of a threat to the self-concept. If the mind is wrong-minded, it's identified with the body, it's so identified with the body, it believes the body is autonomous now. It's like Pinocchio, he's off the strings. It's not a puppet anymore, it's an autonomous being, and when it seems to get sick, it seems to have symptoms and so on and so forth that come from things in the world. Lack of certain things, or radiation, or exposure to certain diseases and so on and so forth, but those are all just stories that the ego invents and projects as part of its sickness projection. So when he says the mind was sick, that thought the body could be sick, he's basically saying that, he says this in Lesson 136, sickness is it's a decision. We're not raised with the idea that sickness is a decision. And I've had people all around the world, and I've been traveling for years, decades, people would say, wait a minute, David, who in their right mind would choose to be sick? And I say, there, you've got it. No one in their right mind would choose to be sick, because sickness is not a right-minded decision, it's a wrong-minded decision. So you start to realize, the question is not about what could happen in form to the body, hypothetically, but it's really coming back to my purpose again. What is my purpose? And then he helps us with discernment in the Course to tell the difference between the right mind, where the Holy Spirit resides, and the wrong mind. With many things, like with the body, for example, Jesus says the Holy Spirit uses the body solely as a communication device. That's a pretty strong line. What about riding a bike? What about skiing? What about wrestling? What about all the things that the body seems to be used for? And there's lots. And he's saying, so the Holy Spirit is just a communication device to bring you in communion, into perfect alignment with your Creator, and to let it be spoken through. And he does say at one point, that's the only purpose the body has, is to let the Holy Spirit speak through it. That's the only purpose. Oh my gosh, that's saying something right there. And then to give us a little clue about the ego, he says the ego uses the body for pride, for pleasure, and for attack. So he's giving us a great lesson in discernment. How can it trick the mind so much? It's the attraction to guilt. It's finding things, situations, people, things in the world attractive, and saying some things are repulsive and some things are attractive, thereby setting up a hierarchy of illusions, and missing the sameness that the miracle, sees there's no order of difficulty in miracles because there's no hierarchy of illusions. So there's a lot in that reply I just gave you, but you can see ultimately it does send you more to attentiveness with mind watching. That's why we use movies, We use music, meditation, all kinds of diet exercises, many kind of exercises that are helpful to just pay closer attention to the mind. Because when we grew up, we learned many skills and abilities, but it's not like our parents were saying, you need to be much more attentive to your mind. You need to watch your thoughts. It's a rainy day, it's cold, I don't want to go out. You need to watch your thoughts. You're having some rainy, cold thoughts there. And, we weren't trained by that kind of training. Kirsten was with me one time, I guess that's in her book, I Married a Mystic, when we were in Florida, and the air conditioner broke in the car, and she was sweating, and her legs were spread. She said, it's just, we got to find an air conditioning place. It's Sunday. No. And I just said, it sounds like you're having some hot thoughts. Her head snapped. What? What did you say? But that's the kind of mind training that eventually, as we go, we pay much more close attention to our thoughts. He said, you're much too tolerant of mind wandering, Jesus says in the Course. Like you just give up on the thought monitoring process. It's too overwhelming. It's enough to just seemingly face the things of this world and all the emotions and the reactions. So yeah, that's a little synopsis there.
Wow, it was a wonderful movie. I was observing how she needs to demonstrate something all the time, and how she needs to defend herself. And it's this feeling like how she uses the time all the time to prove something. For what? And this dream is all the time the same. We need to prove something, we need to demonstrate something. We need to give reality the bodies and the sense. For to prove these things, we forget. And I'm so tired, exhausted. And it was very beautiful to see this today, because this is the ego all the time.
It confirmed that for you, like, I don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah, for what? Why I use the time to do that when I can to be in silence and feel the love all the time in my heart? So what I want to defend? Who?
Yeah.
And it was very good demonstration with this movie.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Acted out amazingly for us,
Thank
for our mind training.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So at the end, with Verity explaining, well, I've been the Empress of the universe, I went to the moon, or astronaut, this and that. But then she comes back to attack. My ego wants to poke a hole in that plot, that story. It's, well, she could have imagined a parallel reality where she had healed that trauma. And I do that with EMDR. I help some people overcome their traumas. But to go with the plot and the story, she was seeking those things that Jesus mentions: pride, pleasure, and attack. So she did those things, and she didn't know the ego had duped her, and she didn't even occur to her that she could go to a parallel reality where that wound had been healed without attacking those people. It's kind of seeing that. I'm like, well, if you don't know the root of the issue, you just follow the ego into these three things.
Yeah, that's it. If we kind of use terms of like unworthiness or feelings of lack, deprivation, not enough, not being enough, it's clear that that's what the ego is. She even said there's a hole inside, and that was another pretty strong description of this belief in emptiness, lack of worth, and everything. And it seems like that the root runs very deep. It's the root underneath the human race. In A Course in Miracles, Jesus says you have a self-concept, and it's got two tiers to it. The first tier, the top tier, is the face of innocence, where your face can be wet with tears at the injustices of the world. But that top tier was made to cover over the bottom tier. And he says it's so dark that it's draped with sin. The top tier was made so you wouldn't have to look on the bottom tier. And that gets back to that idea that this deep unworthiness, lack, pain, shame underneath the human condition is subconscious. And at first it's kind of daunting when you think, wow, you mean all these decisions I seem to be making on the surface of consciousness are really coming from, a lot of them are coming from this dark unconscious that Carl Jung called the shadow. The shadow's down there. And it's like the body seems to be more like a robot that's just acting out a lot of unconscious beliefs. Some of them are conscious, but a lot of them are unconscious. It also gives more meaning to that saying that Jesus said on the cross, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." These shadow figures, these dream characters, they know not what they do. They're projections of deep-seated beliefs. And then Jesus says, to learn this course requires willingness to question every value that you hold. Not one can be kept hidden or will obscure your learning. So, this all helps us to say, okay, maybe I wasn't a contemplative, but I'm open to it now. Maybe I never had on my bucket list mysticism, but I'm actually open to it. You start to see the depth of this, and you start to see that there's one line I read recently in the Course, which I just love. It says, Jesus says, there is no freedom from what must occur, and if you think there is, you are wrong. That's from Jesus. Talk about a script is written. That's in lesson 158. I was looking at the text, I'm like, ooh, there is no freedom from what must occur. And if you think there is, you are wrong. Not you might be wrong. You are wrong, he's saying. So he's painting that what I read earlier from, I think it was lesson 153, myself as ruler of the universe. What happens is what I desire, and what does not occur is what I do not want to happen. That's deep. That's why all things work together for good, is because I have to get in touch with that choice in my mind for right-mindedness. I have to get in touch with the atonement. That Jesus, he wasn't God, but he was the Son of God. He was the Christ, not the body. The Christ is neither male nor female or masculine and feminine, but the Christ, that identification in what his workbook is saying, my heaven is a decision I must make. And ultimately he's teaching heaven is just the state of what is. Byron Katie, love what is. It's just what is. But it must take the form in terms of a decision with regard to this world. So that decision he's describing as the atonement or correction. So then your focus becomes, oh yeah, I want to put all my mind, energy, and effort in accepting the correction. I remember when I was struggling one time, I just popped open the Course and popped open to the text, and I read a line that just really helped me a lot, because I was trained in psychology and the mind and so on and so forth, and a lot of psychology is trying to get clear on your responsibilities. And Jesus, in one sentence, he said, you are not responsible for the error, but you are responsible for accepting the correction. Somehow that one sentence just set me off like, oh my God. Because much of our training about responsibility is for things in form. And that's a projection of the ego. You're not responsible for the error, but you are responsible for accepting the correction. You can feel the divine glow behind that sentence, Like, here's where I want you to focus your attention. And then I combine that with another line where Jesus says, do not attempt to project the error to time. That's fascinating. Wow, that's a good one. Don't project the error to time. It's in the mind. Go there. Salvation is among your thoughts. Find it, he says in the workbook. Very, very direct. Like, go for salvation. Go for the correction with all your heart, soul, might. Love the Lord thy God with all your heart, soul, might. That's really what our focus is. And that's a focus on mind training. So within spiritual community, that's our commonality, is the focus on the mind training. Not so much on what's happening or what our interpretation is of what's happening, but on reeling it back. How do I feel about this interpretation? Am I upset? Am I upsetting myself? Oh, how am I? You see how that takes it into inquiry. How am I upsetting myself here? And how can I stop upsetting myself? That's like a real practical question. So we watch a lot of movies, prayer, meditation, exercises, collaborative projects. It's never focused on necessarily getting the project done, but just focused on how do I feel with whatever I'm joining in and collaborating. That's where the inroads come. Yeah.
Just a curious question. You mentioned that it was attributed to Jesus, the would I rather be right or would I rather be happy? Is that in the Course? Or
Yes.
Okay. So interesting that's made its way pretty majorly into couples counseling. Cool. The Course
Yeah.
in couples counseling. Great.
That's very good. It's very good practical application. Yeah.
So, David, can you lead us through, if Maria had made a decision in her mind to follow, in my defenselessness, my safety lies, tell us how the plot would have played out with Verity. Is that enough? Is that thought enough?
Well, I think in the state of, like Jesus said, blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. He's talking about defenselessness, and that's what Amanda was just referring to, being not protecting and defending, but it's not so much of how would the scenario have played out in the movie, because the defenseless mind, the mind that has forgiven, sees the sameness of all things. So an action-adventure movie is the same as a rom-com. A romantic comedy is the same of a murder mystery movie. The point of the training, of the mind training of the Course, is to see the sameness of everything in the world. And that's why he says all things work together for good. There are no exceptions except in the ego's judgment. it also quickly starts to take you more into what am I holding on to, what am I identified with that brings the fear up, the upset, the defensiveness up. I remember I was talking back in the 1990s to a group of students, and I said something like, there's no difference between a baby and a button. And that pushed a few buttons. But you can see where it's heading. It's getting to the point where, I just want to start to transfer the training. There's a famous story. I remember when I was with Ken Wapnick and Gloria, but Ken had gone off to, he was saying, to visit to a convent in the New England area and to visit a group of nuns, a small group of nuns, and Helen Schuckman was worried for him, for his safety. You got to be careful, I hope you have a safe trip. But he goes there and he's with them, and they're wanting to learn the course and practice the course. So it's a group of nuns, and he's with them and goes into the church, the sanctuary, and so he says, now let's go through the pews. That pew does not mean anything. That stained glass window does not mean anything. And he comes to the Eucharist, and the nun said, okay. And they just went on to the next. Didn't want to transfer the training to the Eucharist, but the body of Christ, that's kind of a big deal in Catholicism. But that was a funny story of transfer of training. And people have done that too, this floor does not mean anything, the ceiling does not mean anything, and then they come around and it's the family photo. And this wall does not mean anything. Just skip over that. But it's all about transfer of training, because it's about training our perception to a new way of thinking and a new way of perceiving. And he does tell us in the beginning of the workbook lessons, he said, you need new time ideas. He's actually inserting new time ideas because he knows that the belief in linear time is at the root of it all. The body wouldn't mean anything without the belief in linear time.
That's why you say make this year different by making it all the same.
All the same, yeah.
Thank you.
It's also why he says at no single instant does the body exist at all. It's remembered or anticipated. So you can hear from that sentence, it's a time addiction. The body is just a neutral thing. It doesn't even exist at all. It's only remembered or anticipated. So it's part of the story. And the ego needs that story because it has to, the mind is asking it, where do I turn for safety? And it says, turn to the body. And then the mind says, but the body is not stable, it's very vulnerable and everything. And then the ego doesn't have, the ego just pushes the question out of awareness. Like, whoops, don't ask that one. You see, it's not really logical. The ego doesn't know what it wants. It's kind of like a bastard child. It has no parent. So that's why we have to start to just raise it up to awareness and just see it for the nothingness it is, but not try to fight it, battle it. The ego likes a fight, and it just reinforces it. It feeds off of fight. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
I have a question. So maybe in one of the realities, the Christ or Jesus was not crucified? Well,
even when we use the terms in here, the quantum, they were talking about parallel realities, but in the ultimate sense, if heaven or oneness is reality, then these scenarios that are called parallel realities they're like an anomaly. I don't know if you ever saw The Matrix.
Yes.
in the Matrix series, when he goes to see the architect, and when he gets to the architect, the architect says, the problem is choice. And choice, in heaven there can't be anything to choose between, because it's just perfect abstract light and oneness. So, but there's a whole bank of those TV sets, and you can see Neo acting out all these vicious kind of behaviors in all the screens. And that's the anomaly. It's the anomaly of believing in separation. So ultimately it's more like, if you think of like superposition, if you think of what seems to be solid, what we would call like lifetimes, they're just potentialities. But they're all potentialities of nothing. So that's important to because otherwise we would hope for a better potentiality, and that's a time idea, and those are stepping stone ideas. That's why when you start to practice this, it may seem like you feel more consistently peaceful, you feel more consistently relaxed. He says you smile more frequently, your forehead is serene. What seems to be more helpful, we could say, scenarios, but there's still potentialities, they're still selected based on the belief in separation and bodies and everything. But they're very helpful. I mean, people have said, I want a life where there's more smiles and more laughter and more relaxation, and Jesus knows that that's what the mind has to go through. It has to go through experiences of loosening from the ego, of loosening from the grip that the ego seems to have. And so that's what goes for in the world, like happier and happier dreams, more reflective dreams of light and of love. That's just kind of like saying symbols of like you're coming closer. But then he does say that the dreams of love and the dreams of hate, play out an impossible situation. We seem to see the world in terms of happy symbols and maybe darker symbols. And the idea is we want more happy symbols and less of the dark symbols. And he's saying, well, that's like a stepping stone, but actually you want to reach a point where your faith, which is beyond the five senses, grows stronger and stronger, and then you come to see or to know God through your faith. Like in the Bible with Thomas, when Jesus goes through his crucifixion and resurrection, he appears to the apostles. When Thomas comes in, Thomas comes over and he's actually taking Thomas's hand and putting it right in the wound. But he's also saying, blessed are those who have seen and believed. Far greater blessed are those who have not seen and believed. You see, Jesus is always teaching us about faith. And the faith is going beyond putting credence and belief in the five senses. And that's what it happens when you go deeper into prayer and mysticism. You're really withdrawing your faith and belief from the five senses. And you're feeling more the presence, God's presence in your heart. And you're letting that strengthen and lead the way and direct the way. So that's how it goes.
Because I wanted to believe that he came to teach us resurrection instead of crucifixion.
Yeah. Yes.
And life.
Yeah, that's a beautiful interpretation. Many churches take Jesus off the crucifix and show him like the laughing Jesus, or it's a very helpful symbol. And I think we have our Movie Watcher's Guide to Enlightenment, so we do tend to show movies that point more to what I call it's the resurrection of the mind, and that's accepting the correction. So from the linear perspective, we could say that the crucifixion occurred before the resurrection, but from the mind perspective, the resurrection of the mind occurred before seemingly the event of the crucifixion, because he was calling his apostles, healing the sick, raising the dead. He was demonstrating a resurrected mind, a mind that had no guilt. And that is, I always say, the cross is like the intersection of the horizontal, the earth, the timeline's plane, and the vertical, which is a purpose. So that's great. You're just saying, yeah, you want to focus on the vertical. What would you have me do? Where would you have me go? How can I strengthen, increase my faith? That's all vertical. And then as you do that, then the horizontal becomes less important. It seems to be less relevant. Yeah.
And so because minds are connected, when we heal, much people heal too. Like the one closest to you, or everybody?
Yeah, everyone. He says, when you accept the gift of healing, legions upon legions will arise with you in the gift, in the acceptance. So that's what I was talking about at the beginning, where I was saying it's a perceptual problem, and if it's a projected world, like if you went to a movie theater, the old style movie theaters, and you were watching the movie, but something started to happen. There seemed to be like a line through it, or a glitch, or it started to get really blurred. The worldly attempt would be to see that there's a problem on the screen there, and to get out of your seat and come down and to go onto the screen and start going. When we know that you have to get back to the projector room. And that's what Jesus is saying with his course. He's just saying, come back into the projector room with me, and let's look at the film, and this egoic film that's moving and blocking the light. Literally, it's just a bunch of shadows coming out there, and you don't need to go and try to correct the shadows, but you do need to go take a close, honest look at where do I have a grievance, or where am I still holding on to a judgment or something. Like that's kind of like getting back into the projector room. Because once we let go there, then that helps. It lights things up for everyone.
So it gets fixed, so everybody can see it already fixed.
Yeah. You see it. Yeah, I think it's more like you see it with the Holy Spirit, and you will focus on, put your attention to that which you value the most, and when you start to value light and love, then he says you will look upon that which you feel within. So if hatred is still in your heart, you will see a hateful, spiteful world, but if love is the focus of your heart, then you see the reflections of that love. And so that's practical. You see that's something you can relate to. We enjoy that here at the monastery, and with the animals and everything, with our cats.
Thank you, and yes, I'm honored to be here.
Oh, it's great. It's great that you're here.
So had this been a movie done by a Course person, there was that moment there when they were in the bedroom and they were fighting, and she was telling her, the blonde-haired lady was telling her about the pain. There was a moment inside. I was like, there's that healing moment, that they could have had that instant.
Yeah, the forgiveness.
They could have, like, so they could have broken the trance and flipped the whole thing.
Yeah.
You know, and it would have been a different movie, of course.
Yeah. That's our alternative ending.
Yeah. And I know that feeling. Like, I've had those experiences in this lifetime, the projections of the rejections and the betrayals and the abandonments and all that stuff, right? And they get reflected, you know, and they play out. And I've decided I don't really want to participate so much. I'd rather heal that. And it's kind of about breaking the trance. And it's not just for me. It's like down the road, I had a fight with somebody at work one day. I work in intensive care, and we had an intense situation, and there was just all this, like, we get all our work done, but, you know, sometimes it looks dysfunctional, even though there's a lot happening very quickly. And this one person, these two people kept saying, "Don't do that, do this, do it," you know? And I was just starting to, like, really heat up on the inside because I had already done my work and I was doing a bunch of things to move the process along. And I finally finished a report and I ran to the front desk and I'm like, I'm leaving early. I'm done with this. And the charge nurse is there and she's yelling at me and I'm yelling at her. And I said, I'm done. I'm leaving early. I don't care. And then she's like, well, you did it. And I said, yeah. And I was, you know, there was just this big old argument, and in the middle of that I said, I just really love you, and I'm just, you know, I'm so upset with just everything going on. And she came from around the desk and she put my head on her shoulder and hugged me. And this has been an ongoing thing for many, many years. The not the hatred, but the tension. You know, anyway, I'm going all over the map with this, but what I'm really, really getting at is I really, really want to ferret out that root that's inside of me that projects these kind of things into my world. I want this healed. I'm willing to accept that atonement on behalf of me, but also on behalf of everybody else. You know, that is just the most. It's very salient in this particular time frame, and you know this body-mind situation, but it's got to get healed. It's got to happen. Anyway, I don't know why it just seemed important.
Yeah, that's great. It's great. It's like comes back to the power of prayer. Like when you're praying for that. I want to be healed. I want to release those thoughts or beliefs or whatever is being projected. I don't want to have to need it to be acted out, even though the acting out is making you aware of what it is. So, but I think that's just having a strong prayer life. And I know for me I was not in touch with what was down there. So music and movies and relationships, those are the ways, because there's so much mirroring that goes on, and then in that sense it's really helpful, you know, to see something played out or acted out in some kind of way so that you can release and choose again. So it's not always pretty in the sense of, you know, it can be intense, but when your prayer is to really heal, then you're much more likely to welcome and to notice the things more quickly. And then you start to feel a little more confident, like, okay, there's some movement here, there's a healing happening, yeah. I'm feeling the gratitude for that. Thank you.
We had a long flight to get here,
and I couldn't sleep, and I was like praying and really get in touch with my prayer for this retreat. And I felt to open the book, and I opened the manual for teachers, and when Jesus was talking about gentleness, and this quote here feels really deep for me, when he says, "Harm is impossible for God's teachers." And I said, "Oh my God, I don't feel that, Jesus. I need help." And I'm so grateful because everything here is answering me this prayer. Even the movie, the sharings, everything. But yeah, I just feel to share because I really saw that I still believe that harm is possible. And yeah, maybe it's me still undoing like this teacher self-concept, because when we start to work with people and sharing these things, we start to receive the reflections, all the kind of the reflections. And I was really asking Jesus to show me like what like a teacher of God really means. Like, I know it's like a state of mind, but how to stay in my function, because I know I've been called without like feeling harm with this reflection back. Yeah,
it's like you somewhere deep down inside have chosen to go down to the core of the belief in attack and harm. And you and Gabriel invited me down to Brazil. We went to the largest monastery in Brazil, Catholic monastery, and we had showed movies, and what I noticed that there was 3 Course in Miracles communities represented at this monastery. That's pretty rare. It's not like, occasionally years ago I met a grandmother and a mother and a daughter, the triple generation Course family, and that was kind of rare too. It was like, whoa. Some of you know Susanna Ortiz, and worked with her in the early years a lot, and Claudia, and then her mother. But even that was when I met with some of the other founders of the other groups. That was what they were saying: is it's so intense. They said relationships break up, people leave, people come. It seems very unstable. There's just so much movement, and even choosing a path where you've chosen more like a public, we'll call it public path, then that's what happened with Jesus with his 3 years of ministry. It was a very public ministry, and it made waves. This world, Jesus says, the world was made as an attack upon God, a place where God can enter not. And some of you might have seen some of the Chosen episodes that this spring came out about the Last Supper, and him saying things like towards, as of getting towards the end, it was more like the world hated me, and telling the apostles, and the world will hate you. That's not exactly the most encouraging thing for the followers of Jesus. The world hated me, and the world will hate you. And I've had that play out sometimes where I've just been out, and one time I stopped at a rural church, and it was an elderly minister there who had to travel like 100 miles to pastor the church. But during the Bible study at the beginning, and he, can I interview you instead of doing my sermon? So I said yes. But that's a lot of his questions was, as Christians, my gosh, we try to follow Jesus and we feel so persecuted to try to live according to Jesus' teachings. And so in front of the whole congregation, have you been persecuted yourself? And I said, well, I feel like as I pray, and I let Jesus go before me, he leads me into miraculous extensions where there's a lot of reflections of love and light. And I said, that's been very important for me. That built my confidence in being used as a miracle worker with lots and lots of reflections of love and light in many different countries. Someone just wrote to me recently just saying, I'm writing a book and I want to insert you in chapter 20 something under quantum forgiveness. And she said, let me give you some context. I sent you an email years ago when I was in one of my darkest periods. And I just put in the subject of the email one word, alone. And you wrote to me, and this is what you wrote to me, and it touched my heart, and I had the course, I'd purchased it, but it was on a shelf, and I got into it, and now I'm writing this book, and I want to include you in, but just with this one word, alone, that was just, and then answer the call for love. But I feel like, yeah, that it is quite intense, just as you follow what you're guided to do, and then there can be these reflections, but it's learning to not put the faith in the five senses. Really, it's I think it's just a way of deepening in faith and feeling the expansion in your heart and the love starting to activate by just the faith of following what you're guided to do with your inner direction. And yeah, and know that there's no, the curriculum is highly individualized, so it's not like there's not like a standard of, somewhere deep in the mind we've just said yes to God, and then the way it plays out in form is the way that we can relate to in the most helpful way. So yeah, slowly it builds our confidence. Like with anything, we do need to keep building our confidence and getting more and more confidence, and then the more confident we get, the more trusting we get, the stronger our faith, and then it just, goes as it goes. You have two nice little kitty cats too. Those are those soft symbols. Yeah, they're beautiful. Well, we're starting to head towards 8. I kind of wanted to wrap up by 8 because some people have a trip to Duchesne and dinner, and that's why we start at 4:30. And if there's any other questions, or yes, no, that's one more over. Okay, all right.
Okay, so it was kind of like you were just talking about confidence. I've gone down kind of in spirals, and I felt like her when she started kind of going crazy and her boyfriend was calling her out on, oh, she's threatening, you feel threatened by her and those kind of things. It's like I played out those kind of scenarios, but I still went down the path that she did. So I was trying to think, how could she have stopped that? And like when her boyfriend said that, it's like, what are the thoughts to make it practical? How could she have changed her thinking in there? Because she was so down the path of that rolling train, And by the time she got fired, it's like I feel like I do that sometimes where I get so into it that I feel like I've screwed everything up. There's no going back and there's no good outcome. It's like I wish I could have stopped it earlier on. Or even at that point, like when her boss fired her. What could she have done at that point to kind of change the tide and get back in alignment with Holy Spirit and God and the right-minded thinking instead of off the ego deep end?
Yeah, there's the back of toward the later part of the text, Jesus has a beautiful practical section called Rules for Decision. So it's almost like him answering your question. He's like saying, here, I'm going to lay it out in terms of practicality and in terms of steps. So when you find yourself, he starts off with two basic steps. Decide the kind of day that you want, and say, if I make no decisions by myself, this is the day that will be given me. And he's basically saying, these top two are, you want to practice this every day, you want to make it a habit, you want to really discipline your mind to work with these two steps. Just like 2,000 years ago, when Jesus came and was speaking to the people, there was already the 10 Commandments. But he emphasized the top two in his teachings. He said, here, focus on the top two, on loving God and loving your neighbor as yourself. You see, that's by design. He's saying, wow, if you can really practice these, you're going to stay above the battlefield. You're not going to be down in the murky waters and the dark waters underneath, trying to come up for a breath, feeling like you're defeated. So he starts off with the first two, and then when you get to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you can see in Rules for Decision that where you seem to go, like she went off, where you go off the beam, where you fall for it, hook, line, and sinker, and you go down, you go down, is he's basically teaching us that you forgot what you were to remember, the kind of day that you want. And you've also forgot to remember that if I make no decisions by myself, this is the day that will be given me. So he says you've asked a question by yourself, and that question in your mind, asking a question by yourself, is the road down. It's like Dante's descent into hell. You've just got on the twisted stairway, and you're going down. You're sliding down it pretty fast. It's greased. It's not good. So what he's basically saying is that what it means to ask a question by yourself, is you're asking a self-concept kind of question. You're asking, even though it doesn't seem like it, you're asking for hell, and you've asked a question by yourself instead of, Holy Spirit, decide for God for me, or, I'm here to be truly helpful, please go before me and decide for God for me. So what that question is if I had to give it kind of put it in a form, the question that this is where the slippery slope, where you go down, the question that you're asking in your mind is, of these illusions, which do I prefer? You're gone. It's like a slide, and that is a very common thing, because that's the whole training of the world, with advertisements and all the things that seem to be coming at us, so to speak. It's like, choose me, of that's what advertising's about. Choose this bank, choose this food, choose this exercise, this gymnasium, choose this vacation, But that's the question that takes us away from joy. Of these illusions, which do I prefer? The Holy Spirit is not asking that question. The Holy Spirit is not encouraging us to be asking that question, because he says whenever you feel the need to become defensive about anything, which is what you were talking about, you have identified yourself with an illusion. So it's the ego, mind identifies with the ego and with some kind of a self-concept. She was a worker, she seemed to be doing very well in her company, and then she comes back and she's telling about Verity and this, and basically her boyfriend says, you like to be top dog, and she takes offense with that, because it must have meant something to her as part of her value or her worth. And that's part of the self-concept that needs to be dismantled and be undone. So then we come back to that, okay, what is the purpose? What do I really want to come of this? That's how we start to rise up and climb out of this. The ego's raging there. How dare them? That was a put down. I don't need those kind of put downs, and all these. The ego makes a big case and is raging, but then it has to come back to, what do I really want to come of this? Like you were sharing with your work, I love you came out of your mouth. I really love you, and then it like turned on a dime, She comes around and gives you a hug, That you can see how the spirit can come in. Yeah.
When the chips are down, Dave. When the chips are down.
When the chips are down, choose love. Yeah.
Love chose us.
Yeah.
Love chose me. Love chose her. We came on.
Yeah. It was a miracle.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. That's great. Thanks for sharing those things. So for tomorrow, any kind of themes anyone feels? We'll have another session tomorrow, so maybe we'll see some themes, an interactive session, and see what themes emerge. But then we'll try to I'll just pray on a movie that kind of really helps, or an episode that's short enough so nobody has to get back to their hotel too late. Stop off at Family Dollar for dinner. What'd you have last night? Did you get your nourishment? I had a Snickers bar at Family Dollar at 9:45. No, we'll try to wind up so you guys. You did. That's funny, because I was talking. They were saying, "What restaurants are there?" I said, "There's a Family Dollar," and then they said, "It's open till 10." I said, "There it is. That's where I'm going to be going." Beto's too. There's the Mexican restaurant. Yeah. Okay, I think Anna has a few things to share, and then we're out of here. School's out.